Hello everybody, I'm Silleaf. This will be part 1, chapter 1 of the notebook, written and read by me. Summary. There's a saying that floats around, never meet your idols. And for one Midoriya Izuku, he couldn't help but agree with that statement after meeting the number one hero. That is, until his lost notebook is found and he discovers other branches of heroics. Not to mention, beginning to study under the principal of his dream school. Chapter 1. Lost and Found. The wind blowing and the thump of a broken heart seemed to be the only sounds that reached the ears of Midoriya Izuku as he stared at the spot his idol once stood. All at once he felt heavy with dread and light with the feeling of someone who just got their last hopes teared away. The words of the number one hero struck him in the heart like a dagger, striking into his very soul. His whole life surrounded around heroics, and now it felt like it meant nothing. Like his dream was just a fragile piece of glass hanging by a thin thread, being kept together by nothing more than hope and denial. But now the thread was cut and the glass was broken. Midoriya swallowed down his tears as he headed down the stairs of the building the blonde hero left him on. His feet felt heavy, and it seemed to take every ounce of strength just to keep them moving. The sound of nearby explosions didn't even seem to reach the greenette's ears as the lead of dread seeped further into his veins, weighing him down with each step. His mind repeated the words over and over. So honestly, I don't think someone without a quirk can become a hero. When Midoriya had asked the number one hero what he thought of a quirkless person becoming a hero, that was not what he wanted nor needed to hear. His idol seemed to confirm the words of all his tormentors. Midoriya Izuku could not become a hero. The door clicked open slowly as the greenette dragged himself inside. He tugged his shoes off by the heel and haphazardly pushed them against the wall before bringing himself to his room. Midoriya laid on the bed, the surrounding smile and bright blue eyes of his idol looking down at him subjectively. The blonde's face made his stomach clench uncomfortably and his skin tighten around his bones. Midoriya turned over in his bed as he slipped his eyes shut tightly. He pulled the covers over his shoulders and silently cursed himself for all the number one hero's merch. Cursing himself for getting so much merch, even down to the bed sheets. The thoughts of the number one hero's words and the words of his friend turned bully swirled together in his mind, twisting and turning before entangling together in one big mess. He didn't know what to do anymore. Midoriya had lost all his friends, his father, and now even his dream. All because of a stupid pinky joint in his toe that determined his quirklessness. The tears slipped down his cheeks as he curled up tighter into himself, the bed feeling almost as if it was the only thing in the world, yet everything all at the same time. He wanted to disappear. The next day, Midoriya Izuku did not go to school. He felt like lead when he tried to get up, get his uniform on, and even eat. He stayed in his bed for the majority of the day. He felt numb and impassioned all at once, and his warm bed provided some sense of comfort, bar the All Might merch, which he tried to keep his eyes from falling on. The greenette looked up at the posters that littered his walls, the figures that spread across every shelf, and the blankets that draped over his bed. His stomach twisted uncomfortably at the sight of the bright smile. The smile that belonged to a person that so ruthlessly went back on his words that he preached to the public, just because the word quirkless was involved. Midoriya couldn't stand it anymore. Steeling his nerves and pushing down the heavy thought to return to his bed, the greenette walked stonefully over to one of the posters and began to pull out each one of the pins that held it to the wall, and took it down. One after another, Midoriya's walls slowly became a blank canvas, void of any personality. He set every poster in a pile, gingerly placing each one down to keep them from damage, and every figure was stacked like Tetris next to his folded bedding. Midoriya stared at the collection he spent thousands of dollars on. The collection he spent hours scouring each corner of the internet and stores to find. The collection that seemed to stare down at him now. Taking a deep breath, Midoriya started moving each collectible into his closet, as he couldn't seem to bear the thought of getting rid of them just yet. After all, his mother had bought most, if not all of it, and he didn't want to see all of her hard-earned money go to waste because of one encounter with All Might. The closet door shut with a click that seemed to ring through the greenette's ears like a drum. It didn't really feel real to Izuku. Nothing seemed to anymore. When Midoriya finally decided to go back to school, after his mom practically dragged him out of bed, around 2 days later, he walked into the classroom to see more harsh words written on the surface of his desk. Quirkless, worthless, useless, Deku. Izuku sighed, taking the familiar path to the cupboard in the back of the classroom to get a rag while carefully avoiding the feet posed to trip him in the aisles between the desks. He moved swiftly back to his desk once he grabbed the rag, quickly wiping down the surface before returning it back to its spot in the cupboard. As he sat down, he clenched his fists into his uniform pants, trying to ignore the snickers and whispers around him. The harsh words scraped and clawed their way into his ears no matter what he did, though. The venom in each insult bleeding into him and making the familiar lead seep back into every crevice of his body, making the young greenette tired with each passing moment. It finally came to a halt when the teacher walked into class. Although Midoriya's teachers would occasionally pipe into the berating, his peers always seemed more tame when they were around. Izuku was silently a bit grateful for that, as it gave him a slight break. He could only pray his day would be a bit better and the break would go on, even if the teachers weren't there. As Midoriya was dragged to a nearby alley after classes, just far enough to where people could see, but not feel the need to step in, his small spark of hope was snuffed out in a chokehold. The greenette was slammed against a wall, and in one swift motion, his bright yellow bag was torn from him, the contents being scattered around as it was tossed to the ground. A familiar burning hand was set on Izuku's shoulder, causing him to flinch back and his verdant eyes to shoot up to meet red ones. Kacchan? Before the greenette could continue, however, a punch to his solar plexus had him doubling over in pain, falling to the ground with a thud as he sucked in greedy breaths. Don't fucking speak, Deku, Bakugo spat before crouching in front of the shorter teen. I've had a real shitty week with all your damn muttering and that sludge villain, so you're gonna entertain me for a while, got it? Midoriya gradually tuned him out as he fell into his thoughts. What did he mean by sludge villain? Didn't All Might catch him? Realization dawned on the greenette, practically slamming into him. All Might didn't have the bottles when he left the roof. Dread thumped out of his heart as soon as the thought came to his mind. He caused the number one hero to mess up. It must have happened when he grabbed onto his leg. The pain from Bakugo's punches and his own thoughts overwhelmed Izuku, only one of them ceasing after a few minutes. The other one lingered like a stain as he shakily stood up. It stayed as he moved to pick everything up. It stayed, even as he began heading home. He really was a Deku. Aizawa's patrols were going rather smoothly, up until some guy with a type of speed quirk decided to run after Shota had investigated an alarm going off in a nearby jewelry store. The guy's quirk allowed him to be very agile, and the villain seemed to evade his sight constantly, making the chase drag on. The criminal ran through alley after alley, slipping away from the underground pro before he could get a chance to set his red eyes upon them. After what seemed like hours of running, the villain seemed to be slowing. One turn later, and Aizawa finally had the chance to use his quirk on the guy, his red eyes snatching his quirk in a vice grip, stopping it from activating further. In one swift motion, Shota wrapped his capture scarf around the guy's torso, locking his arms to his sides tightly, causing him to drop the bag he was carrying. He then yanked the criminal towards his fist. Aizawa shook out his hand as the villain fell unconscious in his grasp. He sighed, bringing a hand to lift his yellow goggles off of his now black eyes and rest them atop his head. The underground pro then looked to the bag the guy was carrying, shifting his free hand towards it. As he lifted the bag, he took sight of a dirty notebook lying just under the bag. Aizawa paused before setting the bag down and lifting the notebook up instead. His eyes skimmed over the cover, raising an eyebrow at the hero analysis for the future, number 13, scrawled across in neat black marker. He glanced down at the name, who must be the owner of the notebook, on the cover before flipping it open. Aizawa's eyes widened with each word, his throat going dry. Each page was filled with an in-depth analysis of different heroes, even down to the weakness of each person. As the Underground Pro read on, he began to fill with dread. The fact that all this information was just lying around was terrifying, to say the least. Anyone could have found this. Anyone could have used this. If this kind of information were to be leaked, it could be detrimental to the hero society. Should have flipped one more page, his whole body tensing as he read on. Eraserhead. Quirk. Not sure. Maybe something to do with his scarf or eyes? We'll add on more when given more information. Hero costume. A baggy outfit, at least what I've gathered off of videos. Quality's bad though, so not 100% sure. That consists of a long-sleeve shirt and matching pants that tuck into his boots. In addition, he wears a utility belt, his signature capture weapon, and yellow goggles. We'll add more if additional information is found out. Fighting style. He fights by ensnaring and/or immobilizing his opponents with his capture weapon. He can also use it for mobility by swinging on walls and surfaces. Limited info, needs adding to. Weaknesses. From what I've seen, he needs to be looking at his opponent, unsure why. Needs more info. Theory/questions. Why does his hair float? Does it have to do with the activation of his quirk? Do his goggles have something to do with his quirk? Something to do with the eyes, then? What's his scarf made out of? What if... Aizawa finished reading after a moment, glancing at the villain passed out next to him, still wrapped up in a scarf. Was it possible that the notebook was his? That would explain how he avoided his quirk so nimbly. And if the cover was anything to go off of, there were 12 more of these. He glanced back down at the notebook before gingerly closing it and slipping it under his arm, reaching for the bag moments later. Looks like he'd be taking 3 things to the station tonight. Alright everybody, that concludes Chapter 1, Part 1 of The Notebook. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening.